us. We've asked if you're willing to put your name in the chat and the organization that you represent. Thank you very much, and welcome to today's webinar, the Ohio River discussion series focused on Ohio River recreation. I'm Perry Thomas, a basin coordinator, river basin coordinator with the Kentucky Division of Water. My region includes Louisville Metro, and so I've been working closely with the Ohio River Basin Alliance. The discussion series is sponsored by a number of our partners, including the Ohio River Recreational Trail, the Ohio River Basin Alliance, the Foundation for Ohio River Education, the National Park Service, and Orsanco. And we're grateful to Orsanco for supporting the technology today. Welcome everyone, and thank you for putting your names and your organizations in the chat. A few note-keeping housekeeping details. Please do mute your mic and turn off your camera. And I'll be turning off my camera during the presentations. Use the chat to ask questions. And at the end, we will get to as many of those questions as possible. This discussion is being recorded, and we will make the recording available to others as soon as we can. Today's agenda kicks off with Andrea Ireland. Then we have Francis Kern Manon and Scott Martin. I'll introduce each as they prepare to present, and then we'll have an open discussion. Again, during the open discussion, please be sure to put your questions in the chat. With that, I will stop presenting and turn it over to Francis Ireland. I'm sorry, Andrea Ireland.
Thank you. Okay.
Andrea, I do want to quickly introduce you.
Okay.
Andrea comes to us from the National Park Service, where she is an outdoor recreation planner with the Rivers, Trails, and Conservation Assistance Program. She works throughout Ohio, Indiana, and Michigan, cooperating with partners to extend the benefits of conservation and recreation and help them to achieve on the ground success on a variety of projects. She has been working with the Ohio River Recreation Trail for the past 2 years to promote recreation and connect communities. Part of that team effort has been the Rivertown Review Program. Andrea joins us today to talk about the process and results of engaging communities, especially in the midst of COVID. Thank you, Andrea. And again, if you have questions for Andrea, please put them in the chat and we will do our best to capture them.
Thank you, Perry, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to share with you our Rivertown Review Program. RTCA, or Rivers Trails Conservation Assistance, takes the mission of the National Park Service to extend the benefits of natural and cultural resource conservation and outdoor recreation by providing assistance to communities to achieve on-the-ground success. People often ask, why is the National Park Service here? We're here to help you to find success in your projects. So myself from the Ohio field office and Russ Clark from the Kentucky field office have been working with the Ohio River Recreation Trail for over 2 years to engage communities, realize the vision, and plan for future development with the Ohio River Recreation Trail. The project and this team effort, through the lens of promoting recreation and connecting communities, is also about sustainability and resiliency, quality of life, and embracing the available resource in your front yard, the Ohio River. This map illustrates the context of the project within the Ohio River watershed. It does include 3 states, many agencies, a lot of communities, and it is so big that it took several of us to work on this project. It is, the project area is from Portsmouth, Ohio to West Point, Kentucky, at least it is for now. And this includes 3 states along the Ohio River, about 274 river miles, and 34 river towns. It has included assistance in the development of water and land trails, community engagement, and strategic planning of an organization. That's what our TCA has been helping to do. During the initial Ohio River Recreation Trail Partners meeting in November of 2019, the idea was generated to provide river towns with the opportunity for a quick review process to help promote outdoor recreation and tourism. We were going to utilize the talents and skills of a team that included not only RTCA, but the ORRT, Ohio River Recreation Trail, co-chairs and volunteers, and also the Lewis and Clark National Historic Trail, as well as many of the community partners. We were going to provide value to river towns by providing a fresh set of eyes, a different perspective on what their resources were and opportunities. And we hope to enhance land-based and water outdoor recreation opportunities, creating a process similar to many of the existing trail town programs that you may have heard, but focused on the wonderful resource of the Ohio River. We sent an email to the river town communities asking them if they would like to participate. And we told them that we would provide a free, quick assessment. That doesn't mean that it's without value. We would do a brainstorming process and provide recommendations for potential actions that they could pursue. The selected river towns had to do their part. They had to submit background documentation on their community. They had to gather the leaders together and users, people from the community, to participate in the community meetings and provide feedback. Originally, this was meant to be a several-day visit within the community, but COVID delayed our efforts, and then we had to adjust to how we would do it virtually and still be effective with a full in-person, without a full in-person visit assessment and workshop. That would have been what community engagement would be in our minds. So we had to really adjust. You can see we didn't get started until October of 2020 as we adjusted to the ongoing COVID situation. And as federal employees, we were not allowed to travel. But it also served to shift part of our focus to how they could use outdoor recreation to come out of the situation stronger and more resilient to future impacts. And in the process, we learned new skills and how to be resilient too. So here are the locations of the Rivertown communities. There were 9 of them. We did 2 rounds based on the requests that we received. And we impacted 11 communities. One of them served 3 communities. We had a total of 96 participants providing input on their community. And about 1/3 of the river towns have participated in this process. So we developed a 5-step process. Russ Clark loves a flow chart to execute the Rivertown reviews. We created checklists and process documents, form letters, PowerPoint templates, and a list of resources. We were building the plane as we were flying it with a lot of help from the great ORRT team of David Wicks, Brewster Rose, and Jack Sutton, as well as additional RTCA staff, Michael Schilling and Helen Sievers, and also Derek Schimmel for the Lewis and Clark National Historic Trail. This information will be compiled into a Rivertown Review toolkit later this year. You'll hear more about that later on in the presentation. So we created a series of checklists and templates, and we did a desktop review. This was a look at the virtual presence of the community. We had several volunteers who explored the internet presence and the digital footprint of any community, and they were looking for recreation opportunities in the town as if they were going to spend a weekend there. Their findings were summarized and included in the final reports. We also did a community visit or visitor assessment. It's like a secret shopper approach to provide fresh eyes. But we also incorporated some of the folks from the community to tell us what they thought was special about their community, help us to see what the potential was. Our project partners and our volunteers were feet on the ground with fresh eyes, and they provided a written review of their community visit, and that was also included in the final report. We had a virtual workshop. Again, this would have been a workshop in person had it not been for COVID. But since we had to go virtual, we found that the working agenda was very valuable in helping make the technology work. And we couldn't have done it without our partners. Each meeting included a brief overview of the Ohio River Recreation Trail, the Lewis and Clark National Historic Trail, the desktop review results, the site visit, and then onto the interactive portion. I love this picture. These are people reacting to the fact that this community saw their top strength as a winery or distillery. Speaks volumes. So in round one, we were collecting community input during this workshop via the chat. We were learning. And in round two, we used an interactive mural software to capture ideas, and it included a polling feature so we could prioritize those ideas. We evolved through this process and used tools. So the SWOT analysis was looking at current and anticipated conditions. We focused on outdoor recreation, the river, and the town as a river recreation resource. We provided them with leading questions to help them think about their community, to stimulate ideas, and our prompts were very helpful at getting them to populate each of the categories. Then they were asked to rank each category. So what we found from the results of all 9 Rivertown reviews, there were some common threads within the SWOT categories. Again, looking at it through the lens of outdoor recreation and the Ohio River. They saw their strengths as features that were already existing. Their weaknesses were a variety of factors, some that could be changed, some that would be more difficult. And top opportunities were all focused in on recreation. The threats were similar to their weaknesses, but identifying all of these things would help to frame their approach to any solutions that came up during the brainstorming session, which was next. We had an idea that there were no bad ideas, no idea too big, no idea too small. We did provide them some leading questions, and it was all focused on how to enhance outdoor recreation opportunities and promote tourism. So incorporating that idea of restarting or reimagining tourism as a recovery tool to COVID. How are you going to come out of this better, stronger, and more resilient? So what ideas do you have to further engage your town with the Ohio River, the Ohio River Recreation Trail, the Lewis and Clark National Historic Trail, and outdoor recreation. We had them think about cultural connections, programming ideas, long-term, short-term, early action projects, and how the Ohio River Recreation Trail could be beneficial. So using the mural software again, we prioritized those. We did both long-term and short-term. And these were some common themes that came up from those brainstorming process on all of the Rivertown workshops. Each of them, of course, had their own ideas, but these were generally common amongst them. We did come up with some immediate action items, some low-hanging fruit. These were things that all river towns could use, whether or not they took part in the review. Simple things that wouldn't cost a lot of money, that wouldn't take a lot of energy. Things like updating on the Ohio River Recreation Trail digital guide with the businesses and services that they had in their community. Partnering with ORRT as they progress into their future role. Enrolling with the Lewis and Clark Community Partner Program. They have an interactive map as well. Utilizing the photographs that were provided by our professional photographers and adding bike racks near businesses. Those were some simple ideas that they could use to immediately to make some differences. So we prepared from all of that information, the pre-work, the community input, and assembling all of that into a Rivertown Review report. Our staff put together 9 Rivertown Review reports. The average report summary is 13 pages long, and the average appendix is 38 pages. And all of the information that was collected through the interactive process or the visits, the desktop review, that was all included in a resource appendix. Another beneficial tool that they received was a list of resources for communities in the appendix. And it included funding, websites, programs. It is worth its weight in ideas for things that they can pursue on their own in looking for the next opportunity that will help them to advance outdoor recreation in their community. All of those reports can be found on the Ohio River Recreation Trail website. If you go to the website and look at Rivertown Review, the second click is reports, and that will give you access to all of those reports from each of the communities. While you're there, I invite you to take a look at the digital guide, which is right next to the Rivertown Review. It was an award-winning interactive map of the Ohio River that shows real-time traffic on the river and also all of the access points and communities along the way. So what did they find useful? What benefit was in it for them to participate in these Rivertown reviews? Well, they got a fresh set of eyes on their community, a new perspective, and helping them to see the possibilities. And all of that work, these are just some of the tools that every community gained. Ultimately, it's going to be up to each of them as to how they will use this information. But some of them are already using it by including it in other plans that they are making, using it as evidence in grants that they're applying for, looking at other ways to engage their communities and how to connect their communities to other communities. They're following the recommendations that were put into the report and looking at their brainstorming results as well as their SWOT, and going out and capturing those low-hanging fruit opportunities. The other benefit that they had was that we had ORRT Summit on October 14th, where over 200 participants learned about the Rivertown reviews, and they saw the results, and they heard from a panel of Rivertown Review community leaders about what it meant to them and how they are using the tools, the results, and the resources. So what's next? We have another round of Rivertown reviews coming up in early winter, early 2022. We will be doing an Ohio River Recreation Trail Rivertown review summary of all of the work, and we will be putting together a toolkit that can be used by anybody to provide fresh eyes and enhance outdoor recreation in their communities. These were some of our takeaways, things that we learned from all of them. And I think most important, that working with the Ohio River Recreation Trail is going to help them to achieve their goals and realize the many benefits that are available through outdoor recreation and the Ohio River. These are just some great pictures that were taken by our professional photographers, and the communities are using these in their promotion of their towns.
Thank you,
So,
Andrea.
It's our hope that you and others will be able to use these tools to provide fresh eyes on outdoor recreation and tourism. And now we'll move on to Frances. Thank you.
This Rivertown review process has been very generative, and I hope that you all will have questions that you'll put in the chat. I'll now introduce Frances Kern Manon, Managing Director of Frost Brown Todd Project Finance Advisors and Senior Consultant of Right to Win Cities. For our purposes, it's important to note that she is also President of the Ohio River Way. The Ohio River Way is a 501c3 and now home of the Ohio River Recreation Trail Project. Today, Frances describes partnerships for Ohio River recreation. Take it away, Frances.
Thank you, Perry. It's been, let me know if you have any issues with the technology here. It's been a pleasure working with Andrea and a number of folks that are on the call, with us today, Brewster Rhodes, David Wicks, Jack Sutton, I saw in the audience. Andrea was doing integral work here with a relationship we had with the National Park Service to help us formalize and provide guidance to us throughout the last couple of years. We were excited about their involvement and are honored that they continue to be involved with us with the continuation of the next 3 towns that we can do. What she was just speaking to is a new way of doing an analysis. They constructed it, and we were happy to be their guinea pigs. But just for further context about what the Ohio River Recreation Trail is, it may be evident to us who are river people or associated with the Ohio River already, that the Ohio River is what it is, but without providing, just like any other natural resource, without giving the natural resource a voice, it can get defined by others, and it doesn't own its own entity. It doesn't have its own voice. It doesn't have its own identity. So the Ohio River, the way I look at the Ohio River Recreation Trails effort is it's really trying to codify what the Ohio River can do from a recreation standpoint for the region. And so as it stands, I'm going to try and advance slides here. We are our geography is between, as Andrew was saying, between Portsmouth, Ohio, and West Point, Kentucky. So it's Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana. We have that geography because we wanted to start with something we could, how do you eat a whale? You eat it one bite at the apple at the time. We would certainly love to consider doing more elsewhere, but this is where we've started. So the effort's been around for a few years now. It's a volunteer effort, but it has been endorsed by, these are just a few of the entities that have been endorsing the effort. There are plenty more along the way. With the geography as big as it is, with the counties, cities, states, recreation outlets, tourism entities, there are a number of people who are excited about our effort. So the value of what we also want to do is help provide a definition, not just for the river itself and help give the river a voice, but also help the communities double down on the investments that are made along their waterfronts. So the value of connected trails, these are statistics that came from the Rails to Trails organization, and they were developed prior to the pandemic. So given the fact that the infrastructure bill was just made law yesterday, I think we can look at realizing we've just been through a tough period economically. I think we can look at these statistics and add to them already with regards to the amount of impact that trails will have for our community. So number one, return on investment. 2, trails provide a health cost savings. 3, there's an environmental benefit that is hard to measure, but it's certainly impactful. The calculations of all the economic impacts throughout the region. And then 5, most trails are developed. Oftentimes, when you think of a trail, you're thinking of a land-based trail that doesn't have any water component to it. And our Ohio River Trail, Ohio River Recreation Trail, has a 5th component to it, if you will, that adds water. So now you've got multimodal instead of just thinking of all the things you could do on a land-based trail, whether that's restricted use or not. When you add in the component of having an adjacent water trail, now you've got that many more avenues for ways to promote the region. So as I said, our geography extends from, at the moment, from Portsmouth down to just the other side of Louisville. And for those that don't know, the Crown in Cincinnati is a recreational trail. Some of the folks on the call are involved in the fundraising for the recreational land-based trail that's up away from the river, but does have some adjacencies for sure by nature of being a river town. $54 million worth of fundraising that's going in, and that's one estimate. It's sure to grow. I'm just Cincinnati's Crown. Louisville's estimate on what they're spending on their version of what we would call the Crown in Cincinnati, they're calling the Louisville Loop, estimated to be 120 million. So if you add in, say, Portsmouth's effort that they have with their much smaller but still yet important trail developments that they're doing adjacent to their river, if you compound all those things up, Cincinnati's $54 million investment added with everything else becomes that much more of a multiplier of effect when you can go from, say, Portsmouth on a bicycle or a boat all the way down to Louisville. So the Ohio River Recreation Trail is in the process of, we to date have been a volunteer-led organization, and we are in the process of shifting the organization to be take it to its next level out of its beginning stages, which has had a lot of interest in it, especially as Andrea's already done. The amount of effort that has gone into the original, to the creation of this has been enormous. We're going to take it out of its infancy and really define and codify what the organization is, develop a financial strategy such that there's a sustainable funding source that continues to grow it. The organization as it exists now, our partners at the National Park Service, I think Andrea alluded to it, they have provided hours and hours of value to us, but we want to be able to carry the organization on with a membership strategy behind that. We want to help communities talk about their economic development and the way in which the quality of life can be enhanced with an association with the Ohio River Recreation Trail. I noticed that is part of the agenda for our January conference, and I applaud that, because that is a great way to to demonstrate return on investment or the value of a trail if you can point to those who are not trail people or river people and say, hey, this trail is going to provide some value for you. We are also looking at regional resources that are now available. Earlier this morning, I was just talking with a group of folks about how to leverage your ARPA funding. As I said, infrastructure, as we know, just passed yesterday. There are a number of different resources that are available, and more so to communities or organizations that are talking about regional efforts. And that's very much what we're doing with our 3 states, Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana. And then we want to promote it. I mentioned earlier that we need to give the river a voice. If we don't define it, it will get defined for us. So we need to, it might be odd to us to explain to folks that this is a beautiful resource, but if we don't do that, then the media will do what it will with what the story they want to tell. So new signage, kiosks, materials, printed materials, maps. We have a great digital guide that's been an award-winning digital guide that's been created by the Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana organization, OKI, and we want to take that and amp that up even further so that we can get it into the hands of the people, the users that are going to be using the trail. Like I said earlier, the multimodal component of the fact that we've got the river and the land-based adjacencies just adds to the fact, amplifies even further what we can use to promote for the communities that we're in. And then our core values of education, stewardship, safety. That's another, all the more reason to tell the story about, and to be the voice for the river is to provide a guidance on how to engage with the river in a safe manner, and how to be good stewards of it along the way. So imagine the potential. We today here are river people, if you will, or have an affiliation to the Ohio River. And those that we spoke with at the summit also, to an extent, have an engagement with the Ohio River. We are but just a tiny portion of the population of the states of Indiana, Ohio, and Kentucky. Imagine if we could get just some incremental proportion of extra people who are not currently engaged with the Ohio River engaging with the river. We want to be better about it, leveraging our existing investments with new investments, like what's coming out of the ARPA and infrastructure dollars. And we want to make it more accessible. Getting back to my theme on we need to be the voice for the river, and that will probably look like pre-described destination tours, making it as easy as possible for people to engage so that they don't have to get out a 3-state map. They have one map that shows them where they're going on the river. And with that, I'm going to close and turn it back over to Perry. I'm interested in hearing about our next engagement with a specific project down near Louisville.
Thank you, Francis. Again, everyone, thanks for using the chat. I see there's a good discussion going there, and please do add any questions you have for either Francis or Andrea. Scott is now preparing to share his screen, and I will introduce him. Scott Martin is the Executive Director for River Heritage Conservancy, the creative team behind Origin Park. He is a fellow in the American Academy for Parks and Recreation, is a Salzburg Global Seminar Fellow, and Executive Board Member for World Urban Parks. Holding graduate and undergraduate degrees from Boise State University, he and his wife, Jennifer, live in Louisville, Kentucky. Today, Scott describes the vision for Origin Park as a new Ohio River destination. Thank you, Scott.
Great. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank all the previous speakers. Your insights have been extraordinarily helpful. And Andrea, I'm indebted to you and the RTCA program for projects I've been lucky to be a part of across the nation. So if you have not engaged with them yet, they're awesome, awesome, awesome people. I'm going to run through our project as fast as I possibly can to leave plenty of room for questions. So it's a lot of slides, so bear with me. I will build on the previous speaker's notes and share an insight, and one that I hope provides you with some confidence, is that what's happening on the Ohio today with the work you're doing on expanding recreation and access mirrors in many ways what Europe experienced about 50 years ago when the Rhine and the Rhone were rediscovered as recreational corridors. And I say that and share that with you because it's not my insight, but it was shared by a colleague who was visiting me in Louisville a couple of years ago and saw one of the steamships, passenger ships, making its way up the river. And that was their observation, is that, man, the Ohio sure seems like the Rhone was, according to my dad, when it was looked at as a polluted, crappy river for many, many years until its rebirth as what we know today. So I say that to give you confidence and to say this isn't new. There are a lot of folks around the world who have been in this space, and I think we can proudly stand alongside them, and we'll join them shortly. Now, Origin Park is a small piece of that. It's about how do we take something that's unloved, underappreciated in our urban core and bring it to life for folks, but do it in a different sort of way. So I'm going to share with you and then just jump through a bunch of slides. This is very site specific to us, but perhaps I hope there's some insights maybe and some stories in this that you'll find usable in your community, or maybe help you think about your community in a different way that you can then deploy to advance your ideas, which are equally wonderful and equally authentic to your own landscape. The preview of coming attractions is that we are going to be a very urban world, and we're going to be more urban than ever before. And this isn't an if or a but, this is a fact. So when we look at the Ohio River, we look at it in our project as part of an urban system. And the majority of folks in the river live in Pittsburgh, Cincy, Louisville, Evansville, Owensboro, and Paducah. And how we link together those urban cores with recreational connections, with the ability to get away from the city and get to something that's more pastoral and passive is important to us. And then for our project, how do we create those experiences within 20 minutes, in our case, of 1.2 million people? So the site we're working on is what I like to call the dark spot. If you ever flew into Louisville at night, you'll see this dark spot when you land. It's about, depending on how you measure it, about 3,000 acres in total, including all the core lands and everything else out there that's really been forgotten about for a variety of reasons. But at the end of the day, this circle, I hope you understand, represents one of the largest pieces in the United States of America in terms of urban spaces that's available for public recreation and conservation. And it is right now, to be gentle, not tended, to probably be more abrupt, it's ignored. And what? San Francisco or Seattle or San Diego would give their left leg to have this opportunity. So we have an extraordinary opportunity in this location. So we asked some provocative questions. What if we elevate this forgotten land? And to give you a little taste of the land that we have in there, slide, there you go. It is the Falls of the Ohio. Y'all are very familiar with it, so I don't have to say it. It's the site crossings of the bison, the eastern herd, and that would have been elk and everything else that was with it. It's the site of cultures that are well over 12,000, 14,000.
Well, it appears that Scott is frozen. Well, Scott, if you can hear us, why don't you stop presenting? We can share your presentation in another way. Oh, there you go. You might turn off your camera, Scott, to include your bandwidth.
Is that better?
Yes, we're hearing you now.
Okay. And are you seeing my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Apologies. Yay, interweb. Thank you for your patience. Okay, so we want to advance a big idea of this space. We want to bring this dead space into connection with the rest of the community through the Louisville Loop that you heard about earlier, but also through a bunch of system parks that link together southern Indiana and Louisville as one urban core with 1.2 million people. We want to build on the legacy in our community of Frederick Law Olmsted. He is the designer of the park system that defined Louisville, and meet that bar, because you do not do park design in this community without playing at a very high and scary level. We want to pick up the American tradition of the landscape, and that is on the pastoral to the sublime. The Ohio is a wild, wild space, and we'll tell you how we lean into that, how we find that exciting. And then we want to, of course, honor the landscape that was, the landscape that is, most important thing going forward, and that's a rewilded landscape where we embrace the wildness, the out of controlness, and the very dynamic nature of the Ohio River. So it's not seen as a group of reservoirs that are nicely maintained. No, 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 no. This is the Zambezi we're dealing with here. It's a very young river. It's a very raw river. It's an extraordinarily wild river. Well, let's lean into that and stop trying to put it in a damn box. And how do we have a park that then brings that? So our what up for down here is how our shorelines unite us. What you see there is how the park, 600 acres, rest in relationship to the communities. It's within 1.5 miles of downtown Louisville. And just to frame this up, and I hope frame some of your work, this park is within 20 minutes of 1.2 million people. That means it's within 20 minutes of double the population of the entire state of Wyoming. So when we work on parks and greenways and connections in this part of the United States, the density of humankind that we have to deal with and plan for is different than out west. And our rivers and our landscapes have to respond accordingly to that, which makes it, I think, pretty damn neat. We want to use nature to aid resilience. Look, the climate change factor in the Ohio River is pretty massive, and I believe an underreported story. If you haven't downloaded the Corps of Engineers' outstanding 2016 report on the impacts of climate change in the Ohio, I encourage you to do so. I encourage you to give it to your damn mayor, because every mayor should have this on their desk if they're working in this drainage. The spoiler alert for us: there'll be about 30% more water in the Ohio than there is today. The park I'm talking to you about is on the Ohio River. So we have to lean into this because the river is going to be wilder. It's going to have greater fluctuations, and it's going to carry more water and more silt. All of these are massive, massive relational items that will impact how we develop our shorelines. How do we design things? How do we bring people to it? It's okay, though. It is what we have to deal with, and we'll lean into it. So what we've got in our project is a series of erosional management issues, because the river is not fixed, y'all. The Ohio is a very, very, very young river. She has not settled into her final course. So we want to respond to that. Those are erosion projections with time change just on our site. None of these shorelines are fixed. And if we don't do different things or lean into it or respond to it, we're going to deal with a shoreline that does not respond too favorably well. So the video you'll see run on the screen in front of you now shows you how our park is going to respond to floods. It is designed to be the first climate adaptive park designed on the Ohio River. And we're very proud of that because this park is designed to flex. It's designed to do things that most other parks are not designed to do, and I can't make the video run, but the eye-opening experience here is when we began our project, there was a flood going on in February, typical flood, and we ran into a state park ranger, bless his heart. He was trying to put up cones to block people from getting to the river because the parking lot is about to be flooded. To us, that's a mistake, not blocking out the parking lot. But what we have to realize is the flood is the exciting dynamic event for us. It's one of those rare chances where in our part of the United States, man is put into proportion and feels small. It's this wildness that I don't care if you have an 8th grade education or a PhD, people are drawn to. We want to create the park that invites people in during those moments. We want to be a park that is not freaked out when Jim Cantori from the Weather Channel shows up. Because those moments when we're made to feel small are pretty exciting. And they really, really connect people to nature. And quite frankly, as my roofer told me finally, water's undefeated. We either accept that and adapt to it, or we keep spending money and throwing it against the wall. This park attempts to adapt to it. Our next what up is, what does that mean? Well, for us, it means we get a restoration of those wet woods that used to define all of our river bottoms. And we've designed a park that floods. And when it floods, it becomes programmable for paddling. Where you see those folks on paddle boards now is hydrologically designed to have trails underneath it. So that's a photo of the Ohio and floodwaters when they're backing up. But there are trails underneath there that 90% of the year can be walked on. And that's a unique deal because if you think about it, the ability to paddle between trees and equivalent of in the mangroves in Florida doesn't exist in too many communities along the Ohio River. But that landscape, y'all, that is a very exciting deal that no one else is playing with in the United States, if you think about it. Think about your wet woods along your river bottom, and y'all know how the river behaves. When it floods into those spaces and you're in them, if any of y'all been in it, it's kind of like being outdoors after like a foot of snow. Things get quiet. they get still, and you enter this weird kind of Star Wars almost type space. That's the Ohio River to us. That's our mountain. That's the Front Range of the Rockies in this part of the world. And we want to intentionally bring people into relationship with that space. And our park is designed to be amphibious in that way. And flooding is no longer bad. Maybe it's something, I'm being a little bit provocative here and aggressive, but maybe it's something we look forward to because it allows me to paddle and go into spaces I didn't see. I've paddled in our woods in a flood and seen 30, 40-pound carp swing by. I mean, it's a bizarre experience, but it can only be found in your community and mine. So we want to lean into that and have that come to life. We have a lot of landfills and bad refuse, you know, the old throw it away near the river deal. How do we convert those into lawns? How do we do recovery in a way that's ecologically sensitive? Drives our design. What if we tell the 12,000-year story of settlement here? And this is a really untold story, not only in this part of the world, but across the whole nation. So we've really learned to lean into colleagues in New Zealand, the Maori, and Australia with the Aboriginal communities and ask them, how did you engage your public land? And the way we're going to do it is a little different. We're not big sign people because no one reads signs. What we're going to do is bring artists in, and they can't look like me or talk like me. But we'll have a rotating series of artists who will use art, programming art, performing arts, visual arts, on a rotating basis of telling the stories of all the people that came before on this land. Because I can tell you in my site in particular, we celebrate about 30 years of history that I can tell. And it's George Rogers Clark, and it's fine, and it's a great story. And the Lewis Clark is a wonderful story, but it's not the only story. And there's so many more stories and tragedies and successes and failures in life that we really can draw on this to be your place that grounds us to deal with massive societal changes we're dealing with today. And this river's always been a mixing pot. It's always been a mix of cultures and people. We want to lean back into that, and we want to find strength. And our landscapes tell those stories better than any person can. So that's how you'll see us deal with interpretation and telling the great stories of the land. We're going to use a large amount of meadows to replace floodlands. Look, I could probably put up this photo of your own community as well, couldn't I? These are typical throwaway lands. There's a great recovery opportunity here where we'll come back in and through remediation install meadows. Our park is intentionally different than a lot of parks along the river. We are the opposite of Waterfront Park or even Riverfront Park in Cincy intentionally. Our community doesn't need another waterfront park. Dear Lord, we have our event space and our go have a music festival space. In the entire 600 acres of this urban park, only 28. The rest of it is going to be intentionally rewilded with meadows and plantings because we want to have, and pardon the metaphor, I haven't figured out a better one yet, so I still use this one, it's kind of lame. This is the idea of creating a Yellowstone in our urban core where wildlife can go and be safe and where people can go to see wildlife as well. Kind of a new twist on what an urban park can be. And we need to make wellness work. So the trails, the pathways have to work and be accessible for all people because, dear Lord, there but for, you know, the gratefulness of Mississippi, our health statistics are brutal. And I don't believe it's because our folks and our residents are necessarily lazier or less active. I believe we have failed them as recreation and park planners in providing accessible, safe, clean, fun, and beautiful places to go outdoors and experience nature all 12 months of the year. We have 12 dynamic seasons. There's really probably only about 10 or 12 days a year where you can't be outside in our community. Let's program and build a park that is accessible to everyone and attractive to everyone to get outdoors and get fit in a way that they know it. And I spoke of rewilding, and I'll come back to this again. It was a tee up. This is absolutely vital to us. And let me be just a little bit of a evangelist. I would argue these two red foxes and that I have more value than the red fox out in the plains of North Dakota right now, because these may be the foxes that people see that otherwise wouldn't see them. And if we learn how to share space with them, I'll go so far as saying we add a little bit of humanity about what it means. We add a little wonder and we introduce a little mystery. And so in our park, one of the first things we did is we inventoried fields and junkyards in our community. You will find these in your community. We have more diversity of wildlife on the Ohio River than many Western states. Yet everyone we talk to go study the environment or where do you go to be outdoors, they'll tell you Colorado, Idaho, Alaska, Central America. And that's nonsense. We have incredible diversity here. It's up to us, though, to bring people to it because our wildlife's a little smaller than elk and deer. But when you watch the 180 species of birds move through our site, when you see that we share those tanagers with Colombia and Peru, our mission changes and our connections change. And we find this to be a really profound and important moment. And with the flyway and its position to be absolutely remarkable, I'll tell y'all, I shared this map in September with leaders in our community. This is just one night of bird migration that's tracked. And no one in my community could believe that we thought we had 15 to 20 million birds moving over our heads over one day. That's a story that we can uniquely tell on the river. So we do it in our park by rewilding and spending a lot of time on trails, thoughtful interpretation, but letting wildlife be the star. And finally, we want adventure to be accessible. The Ohio River is seen as a reservoir by a lot of folks, but it's not at our location. It's one of the last places where the power and the muscular nature of this river runs a little wild. And this wave feature is on the Ohio and the Corps of Engineers facility at the Falls of the Ohio. Our intent is to elevate this experience's visibility and to work with the Corps to elevate their role in helping us activate that for the general public. Because it's strange to think, but our little place in southern Indiana and Louisville and your Ohio River is one of 5 states in the United States with Class 4 whitewater in it. And suddenly you don't think to go do whitewater, I have to go to Denver, Colorado. And suddenly if someone is now in whitewater sports in the Ohio, maybe in some small way, we'll start thinking a little bit deeper about what water pollution and water quality means, instead of it just being a scientific study or I read a report about the world's going to hell in a handbasket. And you get kids out there and you turn it into the adventure playground it is. Suddenly the Midwest doesn't seem like what it was. So that's our big view. I went a little bit long, but the argument we're making with this park is if we do this, what would it say about us in 100 years? If you want to know more about what we're doing, check out originpark.org. You all have been very patient with my technological challenges, and I'll shut the heck up.
Wow, rewilding indeed. Thank you. Several people have put questions in the chat, and I'll encourage others to do so. I'll also ask Francis and Andrea to be sure your cameras are on, and I will turn mine on. Thank you. Now,
May I ask the first question for Scott?
Yes, Francis.
So Scott, well, unbelievable. I think it's fantastic because when we start thinking about the infrastructure dollars that are flowing our way, good Lord, I hope we're not building for today, because it's going to be a wasted effort to do that. And it's super interesting what you're doing. Where are you in the process? So great concepts. I haven't been down there. Tell us where you are in the process. How soon can we go see your park?
Yeah, good question. We started this work about 2.5 years ago. The master plan is now complete. In fact, we're past the master plan. We're into construction drawings now. We have secured about 300 of the 600 acres we need, which means we already have 3 times the acres of waterfront park for dear colleagues across the river. And we are going to embark on our capital campaign with, we hope, a very strong lift from the state of Indiana through a state program on placemaking they kicked off this year. The intent with that is to have the first phase of this park, which will be 100 acres, open in late 2024.
All right, thank you. And Andrea, we wondered, is there any plan to build on the common themes that your studies have shown across the river towns?
Well, that is part of the work that the Ohio River Recreation Trail is doing in connecting those communities, promoting recreation, connecting communities. And so we will be looking at those common themes and how we can better help those communities, those river towns, to look upstream and downstream and make those connections for the benefit of the extended communities, not only themselves.
Wonderful. And we've had a number of comments in the chat, including input from Free, that includes Black and Indigenous voices. And Nick Callahan, new member of the staff at Orsanco, wonders if there is a focus on using the Ohio River Recreation Trail for historical and environmental education, including Indigenous and Black populations. Any of you take that one?
We I'll weigh in on that one. I think that gets to what I was trying to say with regards to providing a voice for the river and telling the story, because as Scott said, we always talk about Lewis and Clark. There are a number, people have lived and died by the river for millennia. So why don't we tell every story? We don't have to just tell Lewis and Clark's story. To the fellow or person who asked the question, there's stories that were being told here long before those guys came down the river. So yes, I'd say that is part of the redefining for the population what the Ohio means for these 3 states.
Terrific. And then from David Witz, we have a comment first that you probably all saw the park is open now, the Land of Origin Park. And then go ahead, David.
Sure. I was going to say that, you know, even though the future Origin Park will be further developed, it's open now. There's a wonderful greenway that the 3 cities have built, and the creek and the river is paddleable day. And so it's an exciting thing. To answer the question about outreach, you know, I think it's about infrastructure parts as well as programmatic. I think you can recognize the work that Brewster Rhodes and the Adventure Crew does in getting, you know, minority kids and urban kids, underserved kids out. It's a programmatic place. In Louisville, in addition to what Mr. Martin is planning and building over on the Indiana side, the city of Louisville is building a brand new Shawnee Outdoor Learning Center in the middle of our West End, which will be access to the river. And so it is that walkable notion that Scott was referring to, that, you know, let's figure out how you can walk 20 minutes to a place. And you know, it's just great to have both of those facilities now on the lower pool of the Ohio.
And PJ Donovan's question, we've touched on this. Does anyone want to elaborate how this concept would fit with the Army Corps' Environmental Infrastructure Program?
Well, there's not, I can't answer for the Army Corps. I know there are several Army Corps folks on with us, but I think when we think about what happened in New Orleans a few years ago, or what happened in Texas during the flood events there, yeah, I think that's a great question. We don't have them on as panelists, but if someone from the Army Corps is willing to wade into that issue, would love to hear it.
Well, and before they do, I'll provoke, and I'll be intentionally provocative here. Again, it'll take a change where the Ohio River is not seen as a sole subsidiary of the commercial barge industry. There needs to be a shift, and it has been, and that's the tradition. That's what we built it for. If we're going to advance what it can be, more voices are going to come to the table through efforts like this and need to be heard and managed. And perhaps the river needs to be managed a little differently. And that'll be a shift. But the Corps has done it, like the Bureau of Reclamation's had to do it on the Colorado. These are shifts. But I'm in a position where I can say this with some luxury. It's going to take citizens pushing legislators to make that change. We can't rely or wait on an industry to do it or the Corps to do it. There's going to have to be new voices at the table that say, wait a sec, this is more than a barge pathway.
So, okay, good afternoon. It's PJ from the Corps. I was actually talking to the Huntington District Commander while you guys were discussing this about the value of being on this phone call and the value that the recreational component of the river brings to us as an entity, and why we need to think about it in a different space. So Scott, I hear you loud and clear. I'm one voice in this. There's some things I think we need to think about, you know, as we look at the industrialized waterway that it is, and we look at the idea of how those locks and dams were established and why they were established to create these pools of navigation that we use for all this wonderful recreational development, all the clean water, drinking water we're able to pull out of it, bank stabilization. I can go on and on about the benefits our system provides. But we have to look at that original, what was those lock and dams originally designed to do or originally funded to do, right? And that's where we get into a really interesting policy discussion within the Corps that we're working through at a headquarters level. So these discussions are ongoing. We're looking at how do we better classify the values, regional economic impacts our system provides because of the navigational pools. We're trying to do a little better discussion on that and understand that. We had some, I believe I had a few of my partners here in the Huntington District on the call earlier. So we're getting it. Come up to the Huntington District. We're hearing you. You know, we're working on it. You know, we are the largest civil works district in the Army Corps of Engineers. We got a lot going on up here. So we're trying to learn. So these engagements are critical. So I appreciate the open feedback and the discussion we heard today.
Thank you, PJ. And
So
I just note that we've hit 1 o'clock. We understand some people may have to leave. Andrea and Francis have put their contact information in the chat if you'd like to follow up with them. Scott, I'll ask you to do the same. And I expect we'll continue this conversation in a little while. I heard Andrea or Francis wanted to weigh in, and I also saw Ken Woodard unmuted briefly. So Ken, if would you like to weigh in too?
Yeah, I want to take a little bit of the heat off of the U.S. Army Corps. When we do policies, when we as Americans make things like what we're doing with the infrastructure bill now and what is happening with the ARPA funds, these are investments that we're making in our future. And you know, there are reasons why we built the locks and dam systems in years past. Right or wrong, they're there. We did it for a reason, and I think that we need to acknowledge that we need, if a consumer industry will follow and get ahead of themselves with trends, we need to be doing the exact same thing with our infrastructure dollars and the way in which we treat our park space. Because in as much as someone's going to study an e-bike because they know that that's going to be able to make them lots of dollars selling e-bikes to someone, we need to be doing essentially the same thing with our built infrastructure so that we're getting ahead of the game, much more from a end user perspective, in as much as it is good for the environment.
And this is Ken Woodard, also from the Corps, which PJ and I work together. You know, we set up one floor apart there in Huntington. You know, we're looking for ways to, well, to do a study at least to look at expanding the trail all the way up the river. You know, we've talked with Louisville District, and they've done some good stuff there. We talked with Pittsburgh District; they're interested in getting engaged. You know, right now it comes up to Portsmouth, which is great, and the stuff. You know, it's very excited by what I heard today. We're looking for some partners, or really, probably what we need most is somebody to kind of serve as that single point of contact for us, that they can go out and cobble together the funds from different sources and sign a cost share agreement. But we can definitely work them along the way. So we could do a study at looking at extending the trail, the Ohio River Recreation Trail on up the river. So good stuff.
Terrific. Thank you, Ken. I saw that you asked for any partners who would like to join you in that earlier, and your contact information is in the chat. Thank you for that. Any other final questions or points from our panelists, or David Wicks or Brewster Rhodes?
I have one, and I just think it's so exciting to think about the expansion of the trail all the way for the 981 miles. You know, I just wanted to call out right now that the Huntington District is doing a recreational analysis of all of the U.S. Army Corps lands in the Huntington District piece now. So how can the locks and dams really be used for recreation? That's a study going on right now. You know, and PJ, and I catch the other guy's name, but primitive camping, when we saw Andrea Ireland's overview of what's needed, primitive camping really is right up there. So many places that if you have a trailer or you can stay in a lodge, which is just as good, that primitive camping piece is fascinating. Currently, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is going through their regulations to allow for camping on wildlife refuges in the Ohio River as a primitive camping site. Maybe the Corps could work with U.S. Fish and Wildlife to really think about additional places. One final part for that is TVA has just worked with the Tennessee River line, and they've opened up 200,000 acres in the Tennessee River Valley for primitive camping. Now, I know that Corps doesn't own that much land, but it would be a fascinating process to do a, spot by spot, and now camping right by a lock and dam. You have these barges go through at 2 o'clock in the morning, but it's nothing worse than a train that goes by when you're at a campsite. And so I think, PJ, let's go camping at each one of the locks.
Thanks, David. Brewster, any final remarks?
Only to say this has been actually far more of an interesting conversation than I imagined it would be. Wonderful turnout and lots of creative ideas. And Scott, you are a visionary, and it's very compelling. And thank you for your leadership and raising these other issues much more broadly. And to the extent we're with PJ and others raising the question of extending the trail further upstream from Portsmouth, that's very, very interesting. And I've been in touch with Noel from in Indiana tourism, destination tourism, and it's been a very productive conversation during the course of this meeting here about further deepening our relationship with the tourism operation for the state of Indiana. So the bottom line is up and down the river, all three states that we're currently working in are very interested in building this trail concept to promote tourism, promote economic development, public health, and wellness. So I think we're on to something big time here. So I look forward to working with everybody to make something really big happen.
And just in case you didn't pick it up, Brewster and David are co-chairs of the Ohio River Recreation Trail Project. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you very much to our panelists, Andrea Ireland, Francis Kern Manon, and Scott Martin for joining us today. Thanks everyone for being here, and we look forward to continuing the discussion series in 2022.
Thank you.
Thank you.